And welcome to the Kelly File. Developing tonight, the world's most dangerous terrorists scoring what critics call two big wins from behind the fences of Guantanamo Bay. At this very moment, Osama bin Laden's bodyguard is reportedly a step closer to freedom after a secret Obama administration review board reverses course, deciding, contrary to its own earlier findings, that this man is just no longer too dangerous to release. At the very same time, we're learning that the mastermind of 9/11, Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, is now communicating beyond the walls of his cell with a pen pal in England spewing terrorist propaganda. And wait until you hear what he's saying and who is helping him. Deborah Burlingame is the co-founder of 9/11 Families for a Safe and Strong America. Her brother was a pilot killed in the 9/11 attacks. She will speak to this KSM nonsense in a moment. But first, Fox News senior judicial analyst Judge Andrew Napolitano joins us on this gift to bin Laden's suspected bodyguard judge. They say that he's now been cleared for eventual transfer. We don't know exactly what that means. It doesn't necessarily mean immediate release, but he's eligible now for transfer subject to appropriate security and humane treatment conditions. And you say what?
Well, I say that this is a case that tests one's fidelity to the Constitution. But the law is pretty clear. The Constitution guarantees a fair process, called due process, to everybody affected by the government. The Supreme Court has ruled 5 times since 9/11 that the Constitution applies in Guantanamo Bay. So that means if the government wants to keep somebody there beyond a brief period of time to assure his presence at trial, it has to put him on trial, or if it doesn't have enough evidence, it has to let him go. But we need to know what the evidence is. The concept of doing this in secret and then reversing it in secret smells of a political deal rather than a judicial decision.
It's separate and apart from the secret nature of the proceedings, Judge. On your first point, you know there's a war going on.
Yes.
I mean, in war, generally, we capture or kill.
Yes.
This guy, why isn't this guy just thanking his lucky stars that he wasn't killed and enjoy Gitmo for its soccer fields and everything else that is out there? That is what the critics argue, that actually, when you're actually trying to win a war, the goal is to win.
The emotional side of me agrees with you. And as you know, I've been to Gitmo. And as a prison, it's extremely high-end. But in terms of the Constitution, the Supreme Court has said these people, even that person right there, who probably is exactly what the government says he is entitled to the same protections as the rest of us. And if the government can't try him and prove to a neutral jury what it says he did, it has to let him go. Now, when it lets him go, they can follow him.
Oh, come
on. They can rearrest him. They can even shoot him if he...
We're going to release. We have a 30% recidivism rate, meaning they go back out and try to kill us again.
Yes.
What do we think? We're going to send this guy, bin Laden's bodyguard, back to Yemen, and suddenly he's going to say, you know what, I love America. I'm not going to try to kill Americans anymore.
I doubt that he's ever going to change his mind. But we have a Constitution that means what it says and a Supreme Court prepared to enforce it. Now, why the government chose him and why the government chose to let him go after it said it had enough evidence to charge him and convict him,
and that he should never be released, that they were never going to release him, and now suddenly never mind, off you go.
We have a right to know, and because the same Constitution that guarantees him a trial guarantees transparency, and the Obama administration is blocking the transparency.
And we don't have it. That's page 1 of our update on the terrorists at Gitmo. Judge, thank you.
With the judge, when the IRS was found guilty of targeting conservative groups and denying them tax-exempt status, the president vowed to set things straight.
The IRS has to operate with absolute integrity by putting in place new checks and new safeguards, and going forward by making sure that the law is applied as it should be, in a fair and impartial way.
Yeah, that's the key part. But now, once again, new proposed IRS guidelines released at the end of last year may discriminate against the president's critics. Is history about to repeat itself? We turn now to Fox News senior judicial analyst Judge Andrew Napolitano. Judge, at the end of last year, what did the administration unveil with the IRS?
The administration unveiled with the IRS new rules that will allow the IRS to continue to torment the president's opponents. And these rules will transcend President Obama. They will allow any president to use the IRS to torment the president's opponents, to target them, to scrutinize them, to look at their tax returns, to look at the words that they speak.
Right. Why doesn't it target the president's supporters?
Because the president has the ability under the law to use the IRS as a political instrument, and it's Congress's fault. As wrong as what this is, what President Obama is doing, presidents of both parties have done it because Congress has intentionally given wiggle room in the statute that creates the IRS so that presidents of both parties can torment their opponents. And that's not what we have an IRS for.
Okay, so what they're doing is the IRS is trying to define political activities, and you can only do a certain amount of them. What is a political activity? We've got a graphic, a get out the vote drive. If they have materials that advocate for a specific candidate,
right,
host a candidate for an event within 60 days of a general, and making financial grants to other groups that explicitly advocate for a candidate. What I find interesting in the way I read it, and I'm not a judge like you are, but it seems like the IRS is targeting the president's opponents, but then his supporters, like labor unions, they're not impacted by something like this.
Oh, look, Steve, there is an infinite array of left-wing nonprofits out there who are able to say what they want to say without IRS scrutiny. But if you're a conservative or libertarian or small government or constitutionalist or whatever you want to call it, nonprofit, you have raised money from people who have taken as a tax deduction the money they have given you,
right,
because you are educating the public in the way you think the government should operate. The IRS is going to look at every word you articulate to see if they can infer from those words that you support a candidate. And if they can, then they're going to go back to your supporters and say that $5,000 contribution you made, cough up the tax on it. Cough up the 39% of it and add it to your next income tax bill.
Just the other headline regarding the IRS, I saw it in the Wall Street Journal this morning, and that is no criminal charges regarding the targeting of conservatives or Tea Party members.
You know, in the beginning you said the IRS was found guilty. They would take exception with that. But the IRS admitted what it was doing, and they're getting off scot-free. If any of us had made admissions of that magnitude, prosecution.
Absolutely. We'd be in jail by now. We'd be having somebody trying to figure out how to put a file in a cake or something like that.
Let's not go there.
All right. Judge Andrew Napolitano, thank you very much.
Pleasure, Steve.
So top FBI officials investigating the agency say as of right now, there is no evidence to warrant criminal charges. Joining us with his take on this is Judge Andrew Napolitano, Fox News' senior judicial analyst. Judge, what the FBI says that they have not found any evidence of what they call enemy hunting, with the IRS giving extra scrutiny to Tea Party groups. What they have found, and this won't surprise you, is big bureaucracy and some level of ineptitude.
Yes, yes. And the way the law is written, the IRS is given so much leeway to investigate whoever it wants. You almost have to find bribery on the part of an IRS agent to look the other way or to look more carefully before you can find a crime. Now,
so it was 282 to 8, right?
What is that?
The investigation, they found 282 conservative groups were investigated, as opposed to like 8 liberal groups, and there was no crime found.
Here's my observation, and people need to know this. The culprit is the Congress, because the Congress has so written the laws that any president, Democrat or Republican, can use the IRS for political purposes without committing a crime. Richard Nixon did it when he was in office. Barack Obama has been doing it to an extreme extent. Other presidents of both parties haven't done it as extremely as they have. It's Congress's fault because they each want, when their party is in power, to have that liberality with those laws.
Now,
it's terribly, terribly unfair because it's subjective. The law is not predictable. How can you predict when the president's wrath or political supporters are going to generate more activity by the IRS?
Well, one of those Congress people, the committee chairman, in fact, investigating this, Darrell Issa, has said he does not trust this investigation, in part because it has come out this week that the FBI has only just now, 8 months later, interviewed the victims, the very Tea Party groups. Why wouldn't they have interviewed them sooner?
I share Congressman Issa's concern and even anger, but there's nothing that he can do. The only thing that could be done is a new election. The president can't run for re-election again, so that's really moot for the next 3 years. Or persuading the Attorney General to appoint an independent counsel, and he's not going to do that. So we are stuck with this.
You're saying this dies here, then?
Yes. Yes, there'll be political ramifications. Some Democrats may lose their seats in closely contested House and Senate seats because this will be an issue. What did you know about it? What did you do about it? How did you stop this? But in terms of legally stopping it, the president is free to use these IRS agents, and he has.
And the only remedy is political.
The only remedy is political.
Election.
Through an election, get a Congress in there to change the laws so that the IRS is independent of the White House. That has never happened since the IRS has been around. 100 years.
Well,
wow.
Thank you, Judge.
Judge, great to see you.
Pleasure.
Thanks
Andrew
so much.
Napolitano here with us. Thanks, sir.
The National Security Agency has reportedly installed software in computers around the world that lets the United States government monitor those machines even if the computers are not connected to the internet. They can get to you whether you're online or not. That's according to the reporting of the New York Times, citing NSA documents, computer experts, and U.S. officials. According to those sources, the secret technology could also let the NSA launch a cyber attack. But agency officials tell us the times they use it to defend against attacks. That's what it's for, not to launch them. The targets reportedly include drug cartels and the Russian and Chinese militaries. Other newspapers have reported on parts of this program previously, using documents from the former NSA contractor Ed Snowden. The technology reportedly uses radio waves and is affecting nearly 100,000 computers around the world, but apparently none here in the United States. At least that's what they tell us. An NSA spokeswoman tells Fox News, and I quote, "NSA's activities are focused and specifically deployed against and only against valid foreign intelligence targets in response to intelligence requirements." Well, Fox News senior judicial analyst Judge Andrew Napolitano is with us on the Fox News deck. Nothing is surprising anymore. Nothing.
No, it's not. Well, what's a little different about this is there's no flat denial by the NSA. It's basically saying to us, don't worry about it. We only use this for going after the bad guys. So if you trust them, then you trust them with listening to all of our emails and all of our texts and all of our phone calls, because according to them, while they have that stored, they don't listen and they don't read.
And they only use this technology overseas. We don't even know what this technology is.
No, but we understand that it is done wirelessly and that it enables the NSA basically to hack into computers. Now, if they could hack into a computer in Milan, Italy, or in Syria, they could hack into a computer in Hackensack, New Jersey, or in Dallas, Texas.
Hackensack, I saw what you did there.
All right.
Yeah. But the point is, if they can do it, history tells us they're going to do it.
Yes.
They're going to.
Yes, because they operate in secret, the court meets in secret, the records are kept secret, there's no public accountability, so there's no restraint on their behavior.
Yeah, we already know that some of their tactics that are supposed to be used against terrorists have also been used against ordinary criminals and against drug dealers.
We also know that the judge who found this unconstitutional found it ineffective, that the judge who found it constitutional said there's no evidence that it works, that the president's own appointed oversight review board that had 2 full-time intelligence community professionals, including a former director of the CIA, found that it doesn't work. So why are they doing it? They can't answer that because, well, their answer is, we can't tell you if it works. Because if we tell you whether or not it works, we'll be spilling the beans. Now, that is simply not a logical argument in a free society about whether or not we're going to let the government spy on us.
And yet the number of sheeple out in this country who say, let them do whatever they want. If they're protecting my freedom and they're protecting us from the bad guys, then let them do whatever the hell they want. Those people are going to be the ones to hold responsible when it all goes down the toilet. Because if they can break every tenet of the Constitution in trampling on our freedoms and our liberties to get to these things, then we've lost it.
Yes.
You can just throw it out the window.
Unfortunately, a majority of the Congress seems to agree with the argument that you just so nicely summarized. You have, on the right, Senator Rand Paul attacking it. On the left, Senator Bernie Sanders, a socialist from Vermont, attacking it. And in the middle, now there are others who agree with them, but in the middle, the vast majority of both parties in both houses of Congress say, we got to look tough. It better to be safe than sorry.
Because it doesn't make us tough. It doesn't even work. The people who have said, one who said it's constitutional, one who said it's unconstitutional, and the president's own overseers say, we don't actually think this works. And it's not effective.
And the NSA says, we can't tell you if it works because then we'll be telling you too much. Look, we know this.
Yep.
The government has stealthily acquired the ability to destroy privacy. And soon, a generation of Americans will come of age, children born in the past 4 or 5 years, who will never know what privacy means.
And it'll be gone.
Yes.
Which it is. Judge, thank you.
Pleasure.
But it's our fault. Specifically, it's your fault, if that's how you feel about it. But that's just me.
President Obama has long said that he is a strong supporter of individual freedoms.
What I've said, and I continue to believe, is that we don't have to sacrifice our freedom. The freedom to live as you choose. These are not just American ideas. They are human rights. You see, our predecessors understood that government could not and should not solve every problem.
So why is the administration seemingly doing just the opposite, forcing Catholic nuns to pay for contraception? Well, here to weigh in on their fight for faith is Fox News senior judicial analyst Judge Andrew Napolitano. Sounds like he believes in freedom, just not religious freedom.
Apparently not. You know, Obamacare, the 2,700-page statute with another 15,000 pages of regulations, has a lot of requirements it imposes on people and institutions. And if an institution employs 50 or more people, it has to provide those people with health care that offers sterilization, contraception, and abortion. A group of nuns, the Little Sisters of the Poor, who have taken vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience, have said, we don't believe in this. The Catholic Church doesn't permit us to believe in this. It doesn't permit us to spend our money on it. Give us an exemption. The president gave an exemption to labor unions. Right. The president gave an exemption to certain corporations. The president delayed the onset of difficult-to-comply-with regulations for his political pals. He is resisting mightily these nuns. Why?
Yeah, why? It's very clear they don't believe in abortion. They don't believe in contraception.
Not only do they not believe in it, they condemn it, and the church condemns it.
Now, and apparently, I've heard a story that apparently the administration said, okay, ladies, sign this waiver, and you're off the hook, but they won't do it because they stridently don't believe in any of this stuff. And you have taken a look at the document provided by the administration, and they're asking the nuns to do something that is crazy.
The government actually, in its brief to the court, revealed that it asked the nuns, each of them individually, to state in writing what their religious beliefs are. That is reprehensible, that the government would ask a person in America to do that in order for them to have the freedom to practice their religion. Here's the problem. Barack Obama gives people exemptions from the law based on their politics, but not based on their religion. And the religion, the freedom of religion, the right to practice your religion, the free exercise of religion is expressly protected from government interference in the Constitution, and he doesn't care about it.
You feel so strongly about this. You have taken to the pages of the Washington Times today. You've written a great op-ed. If you would you read this excerpt that's in the paper today?
If the government can tax you and me and selfless nuns for fidelity to long-held religious beliefs while exempting others because of their fleeting political beliefs, then the Free Exercise Clause of the First Amendment is meaningless. And the next phrase is, and our rights are in the hands of a congressionally enabled tyrant. Listen, I've been ranting and raving against the NSA since June. Sure. This got to me when I read the government's brief against these nuns.
If you would like to read the whole article, go to foxnews.com and you will see the judge's opinion. And it is a good one.
Thank you, Steve.
And a lot of people feel exactly the same way.
Yeah.
Here's a question for you. Is it a crime to buy a gun for a family member? That question facing the Supreme Court after a former police officer bought a gun for his uncle because the police officer got a discount. When he tried transferring it, registering it legally in the uncle's home state, the feds went after him, claiming it's like a straw purchase when people buy guns for those not allowed to have them, such as convicted felons. But in this case, the uncle was a law-abiding citizen. So what goes on with something like this? Let's talk to Fox News senior judicial analyst Judge Andrew Napolitano. We get why you don't want straw buyers out.
Right, right. But this is different. If you read the wording of the statute, the wording of the statute says, I can't buy a gun for you and you can't buy a gun for me. But if you go beneath the wording and look at the purpose of the statute, It's to prevent a person not legally capable of owning a gun from getting one. But if you are right, that's the intent of it. So what happened here? A person legally capable of buying a gun bought a gun for another person legally capable of buying a gun, and the receiver of the gun went to register it. So how could there possibly...
He was told by gun dealers, this is how you do it.
Correct.
You buy it, go to Pennsylvania, register.
How could that possibly be a crime? Well, he was convicted of the crime, and the conviction has been upheld, and it got to the Supreme Court, and they argued it yesterday. The other interesting thing here is that these are guns not to be carried in the street. This is not a license to carry. This is a gun that you can only keep in your home for protection. And the home, in American history and in American law and under the Constitution, is a sacred place where the law doesn't always intrude. I'll give you an example. Okay. You have a prescription medicine in your medicine cabinet for the flu, and you take it. And one day your kid wakes up and has the same ailments.
Wait a minute. The kid's name isn't on the prescription.
But you can give the medication to the kid.
Of course.
Same thing with the gun. It's a gun to be used in the home. Does the federal government really want to intrude that deeply in our lives? That's what was debated before the Supreme Court.
And it's fascinating because they followed all the rules as they believed them to be, but they came smack up against this federal law.
This is an age-old dispute, and lawyers and judges and legal scholars have been wrestling with this for 600 years between the exact, precise wording of the law and the obvious underlying meaning of the law. Which should prevail when they conflict? Supreme Court will decide it in this case with respect to guns. Prediction? They're going to toss that conviction. Just from the reading the transcript of the oral argument, I think they're going to toss that conviction 5-4.
Because it has to do with what people do privately and legally.
Right. The person didn't do it for a business, and he didn't give it to a person who couldn't have gotten it on his own. They both honestly believed they were obeying the law. And think about it this way: if crime is defined as harm, who was harmed? No one.
Right. Well, I feel sorry for this former cop who's been dragged through the ringer on this thing.
Yes. But he may go down in history as having done the right thing, depending upon which way that 5-4 vote on the court goes.
All right. You'll keep us up to date.
Of course, Stevie.
Judge, thank you very much. President Obama flip-flopping, changing his tune on the NSA spying program. But do his new proposals that he made on Friday actually offer protection to Americans' privacy? Let's talk to senior judicial analyst Judge Andrew Napolitano.
Stevie, good morning. The president's new proposals do not change the fundamental principle that the government on a massive scale is violating the fundamental right to privacy that every American has and the specifically guaranteed right to privacy in the Constitution. The Constitution doesn't say all spying is illegal. It says spying on all of us is illegal.
Sure.
So if the government wants to spy on a conversation you and I are having, it goes to a judge and explains to the judge why in that conversation it will probably learn of some criminal activity. But that doesn't give the government the right to get a warrant or the judge the right to issue a warrant to spy on everybody in the state of New Jersey or Bergen County in order to capture just you and me.
But they don't call it spying. They've recorded all our phone calls. They've got all our text messages. They can turn our phone on in our pocket and listen in if they wanted to.
You know, the Washington Post reported on Friday afternoon, shortly after the president's speech, that the NSA is capturing 500,000 buddy lists a day. Now, you and I are of a generation where we probably don't use buddy lists, but a lot of people listening to us do and know what we're talking about. And 600,000 address books a day and 200 million texts a day, all without a warrant specifying the person from whom the information is to be taken, as the Constitution requires.
And see, the president and the Congress is going along with this. This is a much different President Obama than he was back in 2007, where he said he was going to stop this stuff. Remember this?
This administration also puts forward a false choice between the liberties we cherish and the security we provide. I will provide our intelligence and law enforcement agencies with the tools they need to track and take out the terrorists without undermining our Constitution and our freedom. That means no more illegal wiretapping of American citizens. No more national security letters to spy on citizens who are not suspected of a crime. No more tracking citizens who do nothing more than protest a misguided war. No more ignoring the law when it is inconvenient.
Okay, so that's when he was running for president. Now he is president. He's still doing all that stuff.
He's still doing all that stuff. He proposed two changes. He proposed that instead of the government keeping all this massive information, some third party, private industry or some neutral group keep it, but then the government could go in there and take the information whenever they wanted. And he proposed that some lawyer appear before the FISA court and argue against what the NSA wants.
Sure.
That would be impossible under the Constitution, and he ought to know that.
Let me ask you an exit question, and that is, I've heard a number of Republicans on television say, look, we need all this stuff to protect us. Trust us. Do you?
The Constitution doesn't trust the government with this kind of information. There's nothing more specific in the Constitution than the Fourth Amendment, which I just described. You want to spy on somebody? Go to a judge, get a warrant about that person, not about everybody else. Otherwise, we have the hallmarks of a totalitarian government, the kinds which we have fought our just wars against.
And that's what they're doing. All right, Judge Napolitano, thank you very much.
Pleasure, Stevie.
Texas is set to put a Mexican man to death tomorrow. This is a man convicted of killing a police officer by pumping 3 bullets into the back of his head. But Mexico is fighting this execution, saying it would violate international law. And Secretary of State John Kerry says it could endanger Americans abroad. Judge Andrew Napolitano is our Fox News senior judicial analyst. Judge, great to see you.
Ali, good to be with you.
Does Mexico have any say in how we here punish their citizens?
Well, they would like to think that they do, but fortunately, thanks to a recent U.S. Supreme Court opinion, they don't. You see, the United States entered into a treaty with Mexico and other countries, which says that whenever anyone from another country is arrested in the United States for a felony, a crime for which the maximum punishment exceeds a year in jail, the federal government is required to notify the consulate of the country from which the person came so that they can provide financial and legal assistance. So when this guy was arrested in Houston for blowing away the head of a cop, the federal government did not notify Mexico. It is now 20 years later. It has taken 20 years between the commission of this crime and the carrying out of the punishment, which is scheduled for tomorrow. And now his lawyers are saying, you know what, because you didn't call Mexico 20 years ago, we don't want him to be executed. They're not saying he was unfairly tried. They're not saying he didn't do it. They're just saying he shouldn't be executed because Mexico doesn't have the death penalty. There's a disconnect here. There is no law that requires the state of Texas to notify the Mexican authorities, but only the federal government to do so.
Then why is John Kerry concerned so much about this execution and saying that it could endanger Americans abroad? In other words, is it that if we don't honor the fact that Mexico abolished their death penalty in 2005, that other countries could use their own rules and not respect ours?
That is probably Secretary Kerry's concern. I don't think even he is suggesting that this guy is innocent or that this guy did not get a fair trial. This problem of who notifies the foreign country actually came up in 2008. And the Supreme Court of the United States said that President Bush, George W. Bush, who tried to stop an execution in Texas, not this guy, but another guy, also from Mexico, did not have the authority to do so because the treaty between the United States and Mexico only affects the federal government. It doesn't regulate the state government. So I really think that this fellow's lawyer's arguments are going to fall on deaf ears.
But very quickly, when a foreign criminal commits a crime here in the U.S., do we have the ultimate say of how we punish that person?
Yes. Often the state in which the crime was committed has that say, since most of these crimes are state crimes and not federal crimes.
Mexico has tried before to stop it in 2008, 2011.
That's the one I'm talking about. They did not succeed. I don't think they'll succeed this time.
Judge.
And I hope Secretary Kerry's wrong. I think his heart's in the right place, but I think his judgment is wrong.
Great to see you. Thanks so much, Judge.
Pleasure.
New questions tonight for the new mayor of New York City after some locals accuse him of not plowing parts of the city in this big storm in an effort to punish the rich. One Manhattan councilman tweeting this image on the left showing snow-clogged crosswalks, while you can see on the right, and by the way, this is the Upper East Side on the left, and on the right, the streets of Brooklyn were free and clear. There is more to this story. Listen. Fox News senior judicial analyst Judge Andrew Napolitano is with me now. The New York Times comes out with a story on this late today talking about how all day the mayor, who is about as far left as you can get,
yes,
and ran on this promise of, I will take dead aim at the tale of two cities, the rich and the poor. I'm going after the rich, and I'm going to level the playing field. after spending the entire day saying that it wasn't true, they didn't ignore the so-called rich area, Upper East Side, then came out late today and said, oh, as it turns out, we didn't do all we could.
You know, this is very dangerous in New York City to pick favorites with respect to providing city services. It's especially dangerous in acute times like snowstorms. Go way back in history, John Lindsay clobbered because of this. Mike Bloomberg almost didn't run for a third term because of this.
And you know who was one of his biggest critics when he failed to do a good job in the 2010 big blizzard?
A councilman from Brooklyn by the name of Bill de Blasio is now the mayor.
Yeah, our mayor now, who was outraged that he didn't think Mayor Bloomberg was paying enough attention to the less affluent areas of New York City.
The city has limited resources, and the city, under the law, trusts the mayor to distribute the resources in a fair and efficient way. If he did that and they just didn't get to certain neighborhoods, so be it. They'll clean them up today. But if he targeted certain neighborhoods...
And he's not admitting that. He's denying that.
No. But his critics are saying it looks
and now
that
he's
way.
admitting that the Upper East Side did not get the attention it needed.
Correct. But he claims it was negligence, not intentional.
Yeah.
But if he did target the Upper East Side because he thinks they're Republicans, or he thinks they're rich, or he wants to teach them a lesson, some reason having nothing to do with the orderly distribution of city resources...
Yeah.
He would really expose himself to enormous political criticism.
And we'll get to this because, first of all, it's very funny. One of the Upper East Side's residents tweeted out, the Upper East Side residents abandoned by de Blasio stand on rooftops waiting for FEMA or Fresh Direct. that's life in Manhattan.
That's very funny.
But wait, let me ask you this. And they did say, by the way, there was one truck working on their Upper East Side, but no one noticed it because allegedly it's GPS malfunction. It was there, even though there was no evidence of it. The reason people went to this place with him, Judge, is because he's made a point of wanting to target the rich. He wanted to raise the taxes on the rich here and still does to pay for universal pre-K. Governor Cuomo stepped in and said, don't raise taxes in an election year. We'll give you the money. You don't have to raise the taxes on the new. And he came out and said, no, I want to raise them anyway because I promised that I would and I think I need to.
That's exactly what he said. He said he doesn't trust the governor. I don't trust the governor either. He doesn't trust the state of New York to continue the supply of cash for the pre-K. He'd rather take it.
He just wants to tax the rich more because he said he would.
He wants to tax the rich more. He wants to follow through on odious campaign promises, even if there's a less painful way to address his needs. I have a message for him. If he's going to use the power of the mayor of the city of New York to vindicate his left-wing ideology, at the price of providing basic services which we all pay through the nose to get, he's in for a rude awakening and his honeymoon is over.
Judge, good to see you.
Good to see you, Megan.
On the rooftops waiting for Fresh Direct.
Here's a question for you. Is it a crime to buy a gun for a family member? That question facing the Supreme Court after a former police officer bought a gun for his uncle because the police officer got a discount. When he tried transferring it, registering it legally in the uncle's home state, the feds went after him, claiming it's like a straw purchase when people buy guns for those not allowed to have them, such as convicted felons. But in this case, the uncle was a law-abiding citizen. So what goes on with something like this? Let's talk to Fox News senior judicial analyst Judge Andrew Napolitano. We get why you don't want straw buyers out.
Right. But this is different. If you read the wording of the statute, the wording of the statute says, I can't buy a gun for you and you can't buy a gun for me. But if you go beneath the wording and look at the purpose of the statute, it's to prevent a person not legally capable of owning a gun from getting one. But if you are right, that's the intent of it. So what happened here? A person legally capable of buying a gun bought a gun for another person legally capable of buying a gun, and the receiver of the gun went to register it. So how could there possibly...
He was told by gun dealers, this is how you do it.
Correct.
You buy it, go to Pennsylvania, register.
How could that possibly be a crime? Well, he was convicted of the crime, and the conviction has been upheld, and it got to the Supreme Court, and they argued it yesterday. The other interesting thing here is that these are guns not to be carried in the street. This is not a license to carry. This is a gun that you can only keep in your home for protection. And the home in American history and in American law and under the Constitution is a sacred place where the law doesn't always intrude. I'll give you an example.
Okay.
You have a prescription medicine in your medicine cabinet for the flu, and you take it. And one day your kid wakes up and has the same ailments.
Wait a minute. The kid's name isn't on the prescription.
But you can give the medication to the kid.
Of course.
Same thing with the gun. It's a gun to be used in the home. Does the federal government really want to intrude that deeply in our lives? That's what was debated before the Supreme Court.
And it's fascinating because they followed all the rules as they believed them to be, but they came smack up against this federal law.
This is an age-old dispute, and lawyers and judges and legal scholars have been wrestling with this for 600 years between the exact, precise wording of the law and the obvious underlying meaning of the law. Which should prevail when they conflict? Supreme Court will decide it in this case with respect to guns. Prediction? They're going to toss that conviction. Just from the reading the transcript of the oral argument, I think they're going to toss that conviction 5-4.
Because
That's my guess.
Because it has to do with what people do privately and legally.
Right. The person didn't do it for a business, and he didn't give it to a person who couldn't have gotten it on his own. They both honestly believed they were obeying the law. And think about it this way. If crime is defined as harm, who was harmed? No one.
Right. Well, I feel sorry for this former cop who's been dragged through the ringer on this thing.
Yes. But he may go down in history as having done the right thing, depending upon which way that 5-4 vote on the court goes.
All right. You'll keep us up to date.
Of course, Stevie.
Judge, thank you very
Pleasure.
much.
Well, we are getting a new snapshot on how Americans feel about the NSA disclosures. According to a new Fox News poll, 68% of registered voters say they're glad the spy agency's program was made public. 25% not happy about the leak. The poll asked voters to set aside how they feel about Snowden and his crime. It has a plus or minus 3% margin of error. For more on all of this, let's bring in Fox News senior judicial analyst, Judge Andrew Napolitano. Great to see you, Judge.
Oh, nice to be with you,
Welcome
Gretchen.
to The Real
Reminds
Story.
me of the old days at 6:15 in the morning.
Yeah, well, this is a little bit better time slot. Let's talk about what you think this says as far as a message, this new report that's come out. What kind of message does it send to the Obama administration?
This is the fourth official government examination of the NSA spying program since Edward Snowden's revelation. The first was by a federal judge who found it unconstitutional. The second was by another federal judge who found it constitutional. The third was by the Civil Liberties Board appointed by the president. The fourth was this one, the Privacy Board appointed by the president. They all agreed on one thing. There is no credible evidence that this program has kept us safer or has kept the bad people away from us.
Yeah, but they even went a step further because they called it illegal.
Well, this particular group called it illegal, that the president appointed. The Civil Liberties Board called it illegal. One of the two judges called it illegal, and one of the judges found it constitutional. So this tells me this will eventually make its way to the Supreme Court. This also tells me, the poll that you just showed, 68% of Americans are glad that Snowden revealed this. Americans are getting a little weary of it. It is really, really massive. How massive? The NSA captures 500,000 buddy lists a day, 600,000 address books a day, 200 million texts a day.
Wow.
Before we even get to the telephone calls.
So you believe that it's an unqualified embarrassment for the administration because now you have the president last week coming out with his so-called reforms, which both sides of the aisle didn't really see as doing that much. And what do you make of the politics behind the president coming out with his reforms and now this panel coming out after him, although he did discuss apparently with this panel?
Right before the president came out with his so-called reforms, and you know that I wrote in my column that they don't reform anything. Senator Bernie Sanders, the socialist from Vermont, wrote to the head of the NSA saying, "Are you spying on Congress?"
Right.
The answer was, you ready for this?
Yep.
Congress gets the same constitutional protections as the rest of the United States, which is to say none. In the real world, that would have triggered massive investigations and probably a cutback of the NSA's budget. This gets to your question. The members of Congress are either afraid of what the NSA knows about them, or they want to give the impression to the American public that they're doing something, and the something that they're doing to keep us safe is spying on us. Guess what? All four groups that have looked at this have said the spying doesn't keep us safe, or it gives us a false impression.
This is a direct quote from the report that just came out today. We have not identified a single instance involving a threat to the United States in which the telephone records program made a concrete difference in the outcome of a counterterrorism investigation.
The same thing was said by two federal judges who gave the NSA ample opportunity to demonstrate how have you protected us by this spying. Is there any good that we can balance against all this invasion of privacy? They couldn't present any of the good.
So what will the president do?
I don't think the president will change anything, because the president is intent upon creating this image, a false image, an erroneous image, that he is protecting us and keeping us safe by spying on us. Guess what? He is doing to us what other governments did to their people, governments we fought against in World War II and in the Cold War.
All right. Judge Andrew Napolitano, always welcome here on The Real Story.
Pleasure.
Thanks for your analysis.
Pleasure, Gretchen.
So if Congress will not approve something, and Americans have lost confidence in the president's decisions, exactly who is he acting for when he acts on his own? And is he crossing a legal line here? Let's start with Judge Andrew Napolitano, Fox News senior judicial analyst. Judge, who does he act for?
Well, he probably will act for his friends. He probably will act for his base, for his supporters. Let's say members of labor unions whose pay he might be able to affect if they work for corporations that are doing business with the federal government. Now, he can't on his own change the minimum wage, but he could, if he wanted to, change the minimum wage that the federal government pays to contractors who work for the federal government.
And the White House has been saying all along he may do that, and that may be something
And the
we hear
federal
tomorrow.
government is the biggest spender in the land, so that would have a profound effect on the people that he believes supported him, many of whom no longer do.
Okay, let me ask you this. They say that this has been the consistent practice of all modern presidents. President Obama, President George W. Bush are about tied when it comes to the number of executive orders. First 5 years in office, Bush 165, Obama 167. That they've issued.
Well, you know, there are executive orders and there are executive orders. An executive order was intended to allow the President of the United States to get his arms around and control the machinery of the executive branch, of which he is the head, the military, the Justice Department, certain agencies that he can control.
To carry out his ability that the laws be faithfully executed.
That's the key, Megan, and that line you just quoted is from his oath of office, which is in the Constitution, faithfully executed. That means he has to enforce the laws as they're written and as they were intended, whether he agrees with them or not. Now, here's where he can go over the line, as you asked. If he so changes the law by enforcing part and not enforcing part, that the meaning and the purpose and the intent of the law is different from what Congress enacted, then he's using his executive...
What specifically is he doing that on? Is he expected to do that on, or has he done it on?
He's been doing it on immigration. I mean, he basically rewrote the immigration law by saying, if you're here illegally, I'll tell you what hoops you can jump through and I won't deport you. Guess what? He made up the hoops. Congress didn't enact those hoops. He made up those hoops. The Environmental Protection Administration asked Congress to enact legislation which it refused to enact. He went ahead and had the Environmental Protection Administration enact that legislation as an administrative rule anyway.
But the Supreme Court said he'd have a lot of latitude when it came to regulating carbon.
Yes, and now I'm going to make the other argument. In fairness to President Obama, it is Congress that has given the president, this president and his predecessors, this kind of leeway. It is Congress that has allowed the president to get away with this. It is the Congress that can stop him, and it is the Congress that will probably roll over when he does it.
They can stop him by impeaching him. They can stop him by defunding his efforts.
That's the way they
Neither of which they've shown any appetite to do. I'm not advocating for it. I'm just saying those are the ways Congress can rein in a president.
Look, impeachment would be the nuclear reaction, so to speak.
Right.
But they could defund almost anything the president wants.
If they can get both bodies on board and then get him to sign it.
He can veto the defunding, and then they have to override the veto. So it's not an easy thing for them to do.
Clearly, because they tried many times in the House on Obamacare and they failed. Judge, good to see you.
Pleasure.
My source is the judge. Brian, to date, President Obama has issued 167 executive orders, and according to the White House, not going to end there. So what does that mean for the government if President Obama will just use his State of the Union address tonight to vow to make more executive orders if those darn congressmen don't cooperate. Here right now is Fox News senior judicial analyst, Judge Andrew Napolitano. Judge, we understand this was embargoed until 6 this morning, that the president is going to sign an executive order, the first one in this latest wave of threats, where he will raise the federal minimum wage to contract workers who work for the federal government to $10.10 an hour. How could he do that?
Well, he has tried several times to get the Congress to raise the federal minimum wage, meaning the Congress would say this is the least amount of money that everybody has to be paid per hour, and Congress has declined to do it.
Right.
But on his own, he raised the federal minimum wage for contractors who work for the federal government. How can he do that? Congress has written legislation that gives the president that kind of leeway. But when the president does what Congress just declined to do, is he really doing the right thing, or is he becoming almost like a Congress himself? That's the fear that those of us who monitor these things have about what he's going to announce tonight. Remember last week when he said, I have a pen and I have a phone, and I can use them if I can't get Congress to cooperate with me. He can only go so far with that pen and that phone. He can veto, of course.
Sure.
But when he starts enacting executive orders, which basically tell the executive branch of government how he wants them to work, if he does so in a way that frustrates or changes or substantially modifies the law Congress has written, he's becoming a Congress unto himself.
Well, you know what? We've talked about it on this program. He's done that with Obamacare. Let's take a look at some notable executive orders and actions. He has sealed presidential orders back in 2009. In 2010, delayed Obamacare. You know, that's happened 20 times as well. Changed deportation policy for illegal immigrants. That's the Dreamer thing. And directs the government to prepare for climate change.
Changing deportation policy, whatever you think of the legal rights of immigrants should be, his changes were so profound. There were pages and pages and pages of changes that he wrote, which effectively changed the law by saying, if you're here illegally, I'm not going to deport you unless you do this, 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 and this. And those four thises, he made up, not the Congress.
I know it.
So we are in danger of a president trying to make law rather than just enforce the law, which is what the Constitution says the president is supposed to do.
And if he changes the law to the point where they need more money to run the new changes, that's not going to happen because the money's got to be appropriated from Congress.
Theoretically, yes.
But
he does have his friends at the Federal Reserve.
Sure. I got to ask you about something we've been covering here on Fox, and you talked about it last week. The Little Sisters were being compelled under Obamacare to provide prescriptions and contraceptives for women who work for them. They said, we stand stridently against that, and now the Supreme Court extraordinarily has acted in their behalf.
You use the exact right word, extraordinarily. It's absolutely unique, extremely rare for the Supreme Court to grant an injunction, meaning before they hear the case, before they read all the briefs, and before they hear oral argument, they predict which side is going to win and decide whether or not they should rule right away. They did that with the Little Sisters of the Poor. They said it is more likely than not that you will win. It is more likely than not that the mandate that requires you, Roman Catholic nuns, to make abortion, sterilization, euthanasia, and contraception available to your order and to those who work for your order is unconstitutional. This will be a very, very significant ruling on Obamacare when the Supreme Court makes this preliminary ruling final this spring.
Perhaps a preview of coming attractions.
Yes.
Judge, thank you very much.
Oh, pleasure, Stevie. Have a good one.
You as well.
All those glitches, and Uncle Sam still can't make the fixes. A report out that has thousands of Obamacare enrollees finding out the site messed up when they were signing up, from charging too much, denying coverage altogether. Turns out the site can't fix any of those mistakes yet. Judge Andrew Napolitano, not at all surprised. To the judge's credit, he warned that a government too big to handle something like this can't handle anything remotely like this. And here we go, right?
Well, you know, the Obama administration has basically said if you can't get the right information out of the computer, file an appeal. Now, the Obama administration writes the appeal, hears the appeal, decides the grounds for the appeal. It's basically the same people that messed up the computer situation to begin with. This is not like you've been convicted of a crime, you're going to file an appeal before a court with neutral rules, and it's a neutral court, and it's got a time by which it must rule. These people will rule when they want to rule, and you're filing the appeal to the same people that messed up in the first instance.
That's not fair.
And why are they able to do this? because we discovered it in the 2,700-page statute that it was in there after it was enacted. I'm being a little sarcastic about it.
So they write it and rule over it.
Precisely. And there's no time pressure on them, and there isn't even any moral pressure on them, and there isn't even any legal pressure on them to do the right thing within a reasonable period of time. Is anybody surprised that the government that can't deliver the mail can't record accurately computer information about health care?
You know, when the president spoke to Bill O'Reilly on this matter, he said that, you know, paraphrasing here, give this a little bit of time. More people are signing up. The numbers are looking better. That was sort of the same thing I was hearing from prominent Democrats, Steny Hoyer among them. Give this time. Things are getting better.
I mean, I thought that O'Reilly really represented every man when he said, hey, I'm a taxpayer like everybody else. This person...
Well, actually, he's not a taxpayer like everyone else.
He's a taxpayer like nobody else.
I mean, he's got the GDP of Latin America, but I understood what he was saying.
Of course. And he's entitled to know where his tax dollars are going. And why are they going to someone who's patently incompetent? Oh, we don't want to change horses midstream. Guess what?
Talking about firing Kathleen Sebelius.
Correct. Guess what, Mr. President? When the horse is going in the wrong direction, or when the horse is incapable of crossing the stream, you have to change horses. So O'Reilly's argument was a very good one. It fell on very deaf ears with a very slippery attitude.
Well, it's Fox that's making a big deal.
Right. It's all Fox's fault. Look, this is the fault of the Congress that wrote this awful piece of legislation.
And didn't read it.
And didn't read it. And a president whose bureaucrats simply don't care if it works or not. And no lawful way to force them to make it work. There are millions of people who don't have health insurance because these people don't know how to operate these computers. This is no laughing matter.
Net, we're down over 5 million.
Correct.
Net.
Correct. When is this going to be resolved? Nobody knows the answer. If this were an appeal to a federal appellate court, I could give you the answer. But nobody knows when these appeals will be heard.
Incredible. Thank you, Judge.
You're welcome.
Well, we are also tracking new developments tonight with the president's recent vow to act without Congress. Senator Charles Grassley demanding that the Department of Justice provide the legal arguments for where the president gets some of the power he's claiming he has. Congressman Paul Ryan now accusing President Obama of breaking the rules.
We have an increasingly lawless presidency where he is actually doing the job of Congress, writing new policies and new laws without going through Congress. Presidents don't write laws, Congress does. And when he does things like he did in health care, delaying mandates that the law said was supposed to occur when they were supposed to occur, that's not his job.
Judge Andrew Napolitano is our Fox News senior judicial analyst, and he's written about this issue extensively. So they complain, but they're not going to do anything about it.
I wish that I wish everybody in the Congress had the attitude that Paul Ryan does. Look, there are good executive orders and there are bad executive orders. The president is the head of the executive branch. There are 3 million people that work there. When he issues an executive order that tells them how he wants a law enforced, and his executive order is consistent with the law, that's a good and positive thing. But when he issues an executive order that frustrates a law, so frustrates it that he rewrites it, that stops the intent of Congress, that's a bad thing. That's going around, that's going outside the Constitution because he doesn't have the authority to do that. That's what Congressman Ryan was complaining about.
What are they going to do with the memos from the DOJ giving the president his legal authorization for these end-arounds?
They will never get those memos because the DOJ is afraid to demonstrate to the public, to people like you and I who are lawyers and analyze these things for a living, Megan, that they are without the type of authority that the president claims he has. This DOJ has gone to federal judges and refused to reveal memoranda of legal authorities based on public law as to the president's decision with respect to drones, for example. How could you claim that your legal reasoning is secret? I can understand keeping certain facts secret, but you can't keep legal reasoning secret. That's what these guys are doing, and that's what has frustrated and upset Senator Grassley.
Judge, good to see you. Thank you, sir.
Pleasure.
It's a case of God versus Major League Soccer. A Florida court ruling an Orlando church may be seized and destroyed, leveled, to build a new $85 million Major League Soccer stadium. The court claims it's perfectly legal under eminent domain. Here to weigh in is Fox News senior judicial analyst, Judge Andrew Napolitano. All right, Judge, there are 2 phases to this process. The first one is whether or not they can do it. This judge down there said, yes, they can. Now all they got to do is figure out how much it's going to cost them.
Well, it's actually, for the people that worship at this church, even worse, because if the church and the city cannot agree on what the value of the church is,
right,
the city still gets the property and still can demolish the church, and then a judge and jury will decide later, probably after the stadium is built, what the value of the church is. I must tell you that in the years that I've been studying the Constitution and teaching it and lecturing on it and doing my best to explain it, I have never seen this conflict. The right to free expression of religion.
Sure.
Versus the right of the state to condemn real estate and then sell it to somebody else. The state doesn't even own this, stadium. Because this right of free expression of religion is not only a natural right that we all have, it's expressly guaranteed in the Constitution. One would think they could look elsewhere for the parking lot adjacent to the stadium rather than to destroy a church.
Absolutely. That's such a good point. So what was okay, so the first stage the judge went through was whether or not they can seize the property, the church property, via eminent domain. And she said yes.
She just did not see it the way I do, which is that this fundamental right to religion trumps, there she is, trumps the ability of the city to build this stadium when and where they want to build it.
Okay, so she's declared the city can take it. It's in the city's best interest to build this soccer joint. So now what they've got to do is they've got to figure out a fair price. The city has offered $1.5 million for that property.
And the church elders say it'll cost them $35 million to relocate and rebuild. Guess what? In the interim, while that soccer stadium is being built, while Kilmeade and his buddies are enjoying that great game of soccer, these people will be without a church because of the government. Now think of this. The government could trample as many churches as it wants if it has the cash with which to do so under this bizarre theory of this judge in Florida.
Sure. You know, the city's offering $1.5 million. I don't know of many churches that could completely sack up and move somewhere else and establish a new parish, a new congregation for $1.5 million.
You know, it's a negotiation tactic. It's obviously worth many times $1.5 million, and I understand the city lowballing it, but I don't understand where the city claims it can put a church out of business when the free exercise of religion is expressly guaranteed in the Constitution. So you're very bad precedent. I'm very worried about this.
You say the judge got it wrong.
I do, and I think it'll be reversed, but guess what? The church will be gone by the time it's reversed.
Oh, that's
because these condemnation cases, the city takes the property first and worries about who owns it and what it's worth later.
All right, Judge Napolitano, thanks for bringing this case to our attention.
You're welcome, Stevie. Kilmeade, it's soccer.
Yeah, it is soccer. Is it worth it?
He's gone. Where is he?
Email us about that. Do you think it's appropriate what the city is doing down there to tear down the church for a soccer stadium?
And I'm eager to work with all of you. But America does not stand still, and neither will I. So wherever and whenever I can take steps without legislation to expand opportunity for more American families, that's what I'm going to do.
So he says he is ready to act on his own by using the power of the pen. In fact, Mr. Obama issuing a dozen executive orders the same day that speech was given last month.
So now, a key Republican senator concerned about constitutional overreach, he says, is demanding that the Justice Department provide a legal justification for those orders. Let's bring in Judge Andrew Napolitano, Fox senior judicial analyst, to talk about this. Hi, Judge.
Hello, guys. How are you?
We're doing well. So Senator Chuck Grassley wants Attorney General Eric Holder to provide a legal basis for the executive orders the president is issuing, but presidents are allowed to issue executive orders. What more do we need to know legally?
Well, you know, there's two kinds of executive orders. Remember, the president is the chief executive officer of the executive branch of the federal government. If you include the military, he has over 3 million human beings that work for him. So if he issues an executive order that guides them how to enforce federal law, that's consistent with federal law, that complements and supplements what Congress has written, that's normal and legal and expected, and all of his predecessors have done it. But if he issues an executive order that frustrates federal law or contradicts federal law or does the opposite of what the federal law is supposed to do, as he has done, then he's in very, very dangerous territory. He has an obligation to explain the legal basis for it. I would join in Senator Grassley's plea for the legal argument, but I don't think that this president will reveal it because there isn't one.
And which ones, where do you think he's run afoul of federal law?
Well, in June of 2012, when he was concerned that conservative Hispanics might vote for Mitt Romney for president, He issued an executive order that basically said, there's 11 million illegal immigrants in this country. You could all be deported. If you do A, B, C, D, and E, I won't deport you. Where did A, B, C, D, and E come from? He made them up. They're absolutely inconsistent with the statute. So that's not enforcing federal law. That's rewriting federal law, which he does not have the authority to do.
You could challenge that then, Judge, and you think they could win on that point?
That's the insidious nature of this bill. It is very difficult to find the right person to challenge it. Surely an individual who benefited by his attempts to change the law wouldn't challenge it because they've benefited from it. Only someone who was harmed, let's say someone legally online and ready to become the next citizen or the next lawful resident who was bumped by one of these illegals because the president changed the law and let the illegal stay, that person might be in a position to change
I see,
things.
but you can understand Grassley's position. You can understand his frustration.
Yes, yes. Look, this Justice Department has argued that its legal rationale is classified. Now, you can classify military secrets, diplomatic secrets, national security secrets, but I have never heard of a president until this one successfully argue that a legal argument is a secret. A legal argument is based on laws which are public and legal opinions which are public. So how can the argument coming from those laws and those opinions be secret? But this Justice Department has made that argument, and they got one federal judge here in New York City to buy that nonsense. So I would expect them to do the same thing when Senator Grassley presses them for the legal argument in support of each of their executive orders.
All right, thank you, Judge.
All right, Judge, you're our best-kept secret.
Oh, you're so sweet.
Thanks so much.
All right, it's something we've all done and seen on the road. Drivers flash their lights to warn oncoming traffic about speed traps.
Well, did you know a Missouri man was arrested for doing just that? The ACLU came to his defense, arguing the First Amendment rights were violated. A federal judge just agreed.
And join us right now with his analysis is Fox News senior judicial analyst, Judge Andrew Napolitano. Judge, I had always heard, don't do that because there's a law against it. And in some places there are laws like that. But as it turns out, the act of flashing the light is protected speech.
The act of flashing the light is protected speech, protected by the First Amendment. Now, this is the opinion of one federal judge in Missouri, but he did a very interesting thing, which I've rarely heard of. He forbade the police from enforcing the law. Normally, judges will rule on the law case by case. If somebody else comes into my courtroom and is charged with flashing their lights, I'll find them not guilty. This is a federal judge who does not hear traffic cases ruled that all these prosecutions in the state of Missouri are illegal. Now, they obviously exist in other states. In our home state, there is no law, New Jersey, there is no law prohibiting you from flashing your lights, yet cops will stop you for it and give you a ticket, and the charge is interfering with the free flow of traffic.
Judge, but
by warning somebody that there's a speed trap behind you.
I mean, I'm sure many people appreciate it, not only have done it, but because it aligns with the law. So when you flash someone that, you know, they should slow down,
they slow down.
They slow down. Why would there ever be a problem with that?
So, Professor Kilmeade, here's the question. Are the police more interested in collecting revenue from tickets or in having people drive safely? Because
no question.
Right.
I mean, no question. They want the revenue because if your goal is to keep people safe and keep it within the law, you're doing it. What if you went outside, you put your hand outside your car and went, slow down? 10 to 15?
As long as all 5 fingers are in here.
So you flash your lights in traffic. A friend of mine got stopped and for the same thing, as if, what are you doing?
And was he prosecuted? Sometimes the police will just admonish you because they know, at least in New Jersey, there is no such law prohibiting it. So they can't charge you for committing a crime that's not a crime.
You just got yelled at.
Yeah.
So if this is a federal judge, and we've got a graphic that shows the states that have challenged headlight flashing: Florida, Missouri, New Jersey, Ohio, and Tennessee. So because this is a federal judge, does it impact people across the country or just in the Missouri case?
Just in Missouri. However, because this is the first case to rule this way by a federal court, it is likely that others will follow. It's a well-reasoned, easy-to-understand decision that basically says this enhances safety, and it's just free speech in the form of a light.
So flash on, as long as you're
Flash
in
away. Well, wait, don't misinterpret that, kill me.
Headlight
Flash your headlights away.
Okay. And that's good news for Herbie Rides Again, because that car had the ability to flash on its own.
It did.
That was its way of talking. Yes, that was the only way.
Only you would remember that.
Because that was my field trip to Radio City to watch Herbie Rides Again. I can't get that movie out of my head.
We're going to let you say that because it's Throwback Thursday.
Yeah, I'm going to wear a leather helmet next hour.
Judge, thank you.
Pleasure, guys.
Sorry, we're breaking protocol here. That's all right. That's the good thing about being president. I can do whatever I want.
Well, that was President Obama today on a tour of President Jefferson's home with French President Francois Hollande, saying he, as president, can do whatever he wants since he's the president. He was joking, of course, but that joke is getting some extra scrutiny after the White House announced big new changes to the health care law today, among other changes in recent days. Judge Andrew Napolitano is our Fox News senior judicial analyst. Let me just start with one that we talked about on Friday because it has security implications for the United States, and that is the president unilaterally changed a law to allow immigrants deemed to only have limited terror contacts into the country. Their defense was, we're talking about people who had to pay some terrorist a fine every day to cross over a bridge that the terrorists controlled. We're not talking about bin Laden's inner associates.
If the Congress of the United States had written the laws that limit the entry of terrorists into the United States that way, there's an argument in favor of it and there's an argument against it. But the Congress didn't write the law that way. The Congress forbade the president from permitting to come into the United States anyone who has aided a terrorist or a terrorist organization, voluntarily or involuntarily. But to this president, if he disagrees with the law, he can change it on his own. You and I have talked about this almost every Monday night. It seems to be getting worse and worse.
We keep getting new examples.
Yes, some even more egregious than this. This is a very serious one because this will affect the national security of the United States. This will affect the FBI. This will affect the CIA. This will affect common crime in the streets, all because he, on his own, decided to rework the law in a way the Congress never did.
And he did it very quietly. There was no big public announcement of it. I mean, it was published in the Federal Record, but there was no press release, that kind of thing, until Senator Patrick Leahy, who has been pushing for this from Vermont, came out and said, hooray, hallelujah. And everybody else was like, what? What are you talking about? So he does this on his own. Then today we get the on his own big change of delaying the part of the health care law that requires employers to insure their people until 2016.
Megan, he would say, Megan, Judge, I told you. I have a pen and I have a telephone.
And I'm the president, so I can do whatever I want.
I can do whatever I want. Now, he may have said the last thing at Jefferson's house as a joke.
Yeah.
But that's revealing his inner thoughts. He certainly didn't say as a joke, I have a pen and I have a telephone, because he has used that pen and used that telephone materially to alter the law. Look,
27 times.
If he supplements or complements the law with an executive order, that's a good thing. It helps the people that work for him in the executive branch to understand what he wants. But his job is to enforce the law faithfully, meaning as it was written, not as he would like it to be.
And how about now making the IRS extract, under penalty of perjury, affirmations from people who want to change the workup of their business?
He absolutely cannot do that. He cannot create a crime. And when he says, in order to do X, you must swear that you're not doing Y. And if you don't swear that you're not doing Y, it's perjury. He is creating a crime, which he absolutely is forbidden from doing.
It's incredible to empower the IRS like that under, current day and times.
All of this comes down to a president who believes he is majestic, not to make fun of our lovable friend Geraldo, who believes that he has a certain ability far beyond what the Constitution has given him. And unless a court or unless the Congress stops him, we'll have more of these to talk about. Every Monday night when I'm on with you, there's another one of these that you can't predict.
Democrats are not going to be happy about these precedents when the Republicans control the White House. Judge, good to see you.
Pleasure, Megan.
Welcome back. Well, the Obama administration has reportedly been debating for months on whether or not to launch a drone attack on an American tied to al-Qaeda. Inside officials call the would-be target a really bad guy, living overseas and plotting terror attacks against the United States. So the dilemma here, trying to take him out legally under a new drone targeting policy. The new policy says only the military, not the CIA, can kill American terror suspects overseas. So can this terrorist be killed legally? Let's ask a man who knows this well. Joining us now is Fox News senior judicial analyst, Judge Andrew Napolitano. Judge, great to see you this morning.
Clayton, good to be with you.
Let me break this down.
I didn't know you worked during the week.
Sometimes.
Only kidding.
Pleasure. Let's break this down, put the law up on the screen, and you can tear it apart for us here and tell us what this means. So when we're going after a guy who's an American terrorist, this is what the new drone strike decision means. It has to be an ongoing military conflict. It has to be targeting an individual, a civilian or military, that has taken up arms. There is no reasonable possibility of an arrest. We can't go in and get the guy. And the decision to kill is made by senior political leaders. So under that description there, can we legally go after this guy?
The answer is no. And the reason for it is those 4 points that were just on the screen are not the law of the United States of America. They were written and made up by the President of the United States. They were not enacted by Congress. Only the Congress can enact a law, especially a law giving the President authority to kill an American.
Does he not have war powers?
He does not have war powers to kill an American, and I'll tell you why. There are 2 clauses in the Constitution that specifically protect Americans. One says if the government, in the non-war context, if the government wants life, liberty, or property from anybody in the U.S., American or non-American, it can only do so through a trial. If an American is waging war on the United States, that's defined as treason in the Constitution. And the Constitution guarantees that person a jury trial with such specificity as to say he can't be convicted unless there are 2 witnesses to the same overt act. So the President's efforts to bypass the Constitution, yet again, we've been talking about this for months now, in foreign affairs is just as unconstitutional as its efforts to bypass the Constitution in domestic affairs.
Well, former mayor of New York City, Rudy Giuliani, disagrees with you. He was on Greta last night, and
yes,
he said this about the president's authority. Listen.
This is somebody who's on foreign soil. He happens to be in a country that isn't going to allow us access to him, or it's going to be hard to get access to him, meaning you can't capture him. So he would fit into the category the president was talking about, a person where the president would have the authority to order him to be killed as an enemy combatant. It would be as if, take the Second World War, and we had some Nazis who were planning to come and attack us, and they happened to be in a foreign country, and we had the opportunity to stop it before they did.
Does Rudy Giuliani's Nazi analogy hold up?
Let me say, first of all, that I respect the former mayor, not only as a mayor, but as a lawyer. He actually was a superb lawyer and prosecutor before he was elected mayor. We disagree on this. I would argue that the Nazi analogy does not hold up because the Nazis were members of a government that had declared war on the United States and on which we had declared war. The president and his people, I don't know how this leaked out, but it did, and now they admit it, are contemplating killing an American specifically protected in the Constitution. So if this guy is a bad guy, as they claim he is, that is an insufficient basis to execute him without a trial. Can they kidnap him? Can they arrest him? Can they put him on trial? Yes, yes, and yes.
You brought up a great point, which is how did this leak out? How are we having this discussion in the press when this should be perhaps litigated behind closed doors?
I wish I knew. I don't know how it leaked out. As of yesterday afternoon, the government wasn't saying anything, but last night, our intrepid, indefatigable Catherine Herridge reached out to the government, and they said, okay, yes, we are contemplating it. Yes, we are debating it. Yes, this is an American. We've been following this person for months, and we can't decide what to do. Yet guess what? The Congress has never authorized the president to do this, and even if the Congress did, it would still be against the constitutional protections that he's afforded.
What a fascinating debate, Judge Andrew Napolitano. Always great to see you. This is why I work during the week, so I can talk to people like you. Thanks, Judge. And by the way, I'd love to hear from our viewers this morning. Let us know. Let me know on Twitter. I'm at Clayton Morris. Weigh in on this, and also go to our Facebook page. Does the president have the authority to go after this American, targeting American citizens?
It's extraordinary that this story is leaked by, I think, 4 American officials. If I were the administration, I were the president, I'd be very concerned that 4 American officials are talking about this to the press, off the record. That's a serious breach of, protecting our national security. If this guy has any brains, he's already figured out who he is, and he's hiding somewhere. So, a lot of the ways in which they can protect us have already been compromised by the fact that this has been leaked.
That was Rudy Giuliani reacting to the latest White House leak that could have a significant impact on securing the homeland.
The debate is on whether or not the U.S. can strike an American citizen overseas, a citizen planning attacks here at home. Judge Anna Napolitano, Fox senior judicial analyst, with us now. How are you, Judge?
Good, guys.
Okay, so let's talk about the leaks. The New York Times and the Associated Press this week reported that there's this internal debate going on inside the White House as to whether or not we can use a drone to kill a U.S. citizen abroad. Now, this is classified information. What can the White House do about somebody who's sharing it with the media?
Probably very little, because the government itself uses leaks when it wants information out there. And the government is not always monolithic, meaning not everybody at the top levels thinks the same way. So the leaker is probably a very high-level person who wants to generate this debate to challenge the prevailing notion that the president has the authority to use a drone to kill. It's probably somebody within the president's inner circle.
Yeah, now listen.
This is not a Snowden-type leak. This is a very high-end type leak.
They killed a Laki in Yemen. He's an American citizen.
Yes.
Yes, they did. What was the defense then?
They also killed his 16-year-old son, who was an American citizen. Since that time, the president gave a speech at the University of Notre Dame, and the Attorney General gave a speech at Northwestern Law School, and they both said the president has set forth a basis for deciding who he's going to kill.
And let me stop you for a second, because we have a portion of that speech in which he lays out, the president does, his rationale. So listen to this. Any moment now.
But when a U.S. citizen goes abroad to wage war against America and is actively plotting to kill U.S. citizens, and when neither the United States nor our partners are in a position to capture him before he carries out a plot, his citizenship should no more serve as a shield than a sniper shooting down on an innocent crowd should be protected from a SWAT team.
There you go.
That is the president at one of my alma maters, the University of Notre Dame. Unfortunately, what the president just said there is not the law of the land. It's a set of rules that he himself made up to govern himself, to be ruled upon and administered in secret. If the Congress had said, the president has the authority to kill Americans as long as the following 6 conditions are met, in my view, that would still violate the Constitution. But at least that would be a law enacted by the Congress. This president has not gone to the Congress. This president has written his own rules to govern himself in private. There's no basis for that under the Constitution whatsoever. Nor is there a basis for the president to kill an American. On the contrary, the Constitution defines treason as waging war against the United States and guarantees you a trial and requires that the government have 2 witnesses to the same overt act. There is no crime defined with more specificity than that in the Constitution.
And I know that's your opinion, and I respect that.
Well, that's not my opinion. That's what the Constitution says.
They've already done it against others, Alaki, as we mentioned, and his son.
They acknowledge that they have killed 4 Americans secretly, Alaki, his son, and 2 others.
One intentionally.
Under this administration, based on what you just heard, what's to prevent them from doing it again?
Nothing.
If anything.
Nothing except public opinion. The Congress is going to roll over like a potted plant. The person they want to kill probably is a bad guy, but it does not justify the president doing that. We fought wars against tyrants who thought they could kill people they called bad.
Thank you, Judge.
Thanks, Judge. Great to see you.
Likewise.
Story today, Senator Rand Paul announces a class action lawsuit against the president over gathering of Americans' phone records. Other top intelligence officials, including the NSA director, also named in the suit. The senator speaking to reporters about an hour ago.
On behalf of myself, FreedomWorks, and everyone in America that has a phone, we are filing suit against the President of the United States in defense of the 4th Amendment. We will ask the question in court whether a single warrant can apply to the records of every American phone user all of the time, without limits, without individualization. This, we believe, will be a historic lawsuit. We think it may well be the largest class action lawsuit ever filed on behalf of the Bill of Rights.
Well, reacting to Senator Paul, the Justice Department just released this statement saying this: "We remain confident that the program is legal, as at least 15 judges have previously found." Well, we have our own judge today, Judge Andrew Napolitano, our Fox News senior judicial analyst. What do you think, Judge? Is there a case here?
Yes, I think Senator Paul has an excellent case, and he's right. It will be the biggest class action in support of the Bill of Rights, of the biggest class action in history. A class action is when a small group of plaintiffs, in this case himself, sues in behalf of others who've suffered the same injury. The NSA has, by its silence, pretty much admitted that the others includes everybody in the United States.
But in that circumstance, when you're representing so many, do you have to give examples for each and every person that you're representing and how they have been harmed?
Very good question. No. The court will allow what's called a bellwether, a fancy legal phrase for we'll take one or two people as examples and we'll assume that the injury that those one or two suffered are common among the class. That's what happens in a class action case, say in a consumer product situation. Somebody's harmed by a consumer product, and they sue in behalf of all consumers who've used the product, even though the level of harm is different. Here, the level of harm is essentially the same, and here the NSA essentially admits what it's been doing. It's been gathering this evidence about all Americans on the basis of single, what we call general warrants, not warrants that identify the specific target. Senator Paul and his fellow plaintiffs are merely asking a federal court to decide if that's lawful, and if it's not, to make them stop.
Is it a constitutional question?
Yes, it's a constitutional question, and here's the constitutional question in a nutshell. Does the requirement of the Fourth Amendment, which says when the government wants to search something, like your phone records or your phone calls, it has to identify the person to be searched, the place to be searched, and it has to come up with a reason to search that individual. Does that apply to the NSA? Because the NSA says, we're not governed by the Fourth Amendment. We're not interested in solving crime. We can listen to what everybody says, whether we can identify them or not.
Well, and that's what the Justice Department is saying. In their response, 15 judges already said that's okay. So how is this case different?
Because 13 of those 15 judges are on the FISA court. And when the FISA court makes a ruling, there's nobody resisting the ruling. It's a judge with just the government appearing before it. The other two judges went both ways on this. They were federal judges who had trials in their courtroom with lawyers representing the NSA and lawyers representing the plaintiffs. And one of these judges said, this is unconstitutional. You can't have one warrant for 100 million people. And the other said, it is constitutional. It's an appropriate response to 9/11. So those two differing decisions mean that this case will eventually get to the Supreme Court. We'll probably have a third decision from this case that Senator Paul just filed.
Andy McCarthy was on our show just last hour. Bob Mueller, former director of the FBI, says Andy's one of the finest prosecutors in history when it comes to combating terror.
I agree with Bob Mueller on Andy's qualifications.
One of the things, Andy and I were talking a little bit about this topic, and he said one of the things that can come up here is not so much a constitutional issue, but an issue about the Patriot Act. And he says that the NSA has, and this argument has been made in court, and maybe it does need to be made, that the NSA is saying we have to collect everybody's phone records. We have to get the judges and Johns and Keiths and everybody else that's in our room right now, so that the algorithms work, so that we can actually see the people that are doing the bad things. We need everybody's records.
Well, then,
what about that argument?
Then they would need to change the Constitution, because the Constitution expressly prohibits it. One of the reasons it prohibits it is because what the NSA is doing to us today in 2014 is substantially similar to what British soldiers did to us in the colonial era. They got a general warrant in London from a judge who met in secret, which authorized them to search any of the colonists they wanted for whatever they wanted to find. They came over here in this country, presented the general warrant on various colonist doors, and started searching away. Guess what? It was the last straw before we fought the revolution.
So could you do something, and I'm not trying to throw a bunch of hypothetics, but Rand Paul was just talking about the 300 million Americans whose phone records have been collected.
Right.
What happens if it's something general for a specific group? Still millions of people, but we're going to look at 25 to 35-year-old males in this country because this is the group we're targeting.
You know,
would that be allowed?
This is the great clash between privacy and safety. And when people are afraid, most people will opt for safety rather than privacy. They'll say anything to keep me safe. But they don't realize that they are losing the safety of their liberties. The Constitution was written to force the government intentionally to jump through hoops before it could invade our privacy. Requiring the government to identify whose phone calls it wants to listen to is not asking very much. It's just asking them to follow the Constitution.
But what do you think families of the victims of 9/11 would say to that? Sure, we want our liberties, but if we had these programs in place, then our relatives wouldn't be dead.
I think that families of 9/11 have a very legitimate beef that the government should have done a lot more to have kept their loved ones alive, and I share their grief. But I also share the love of the Constitution that many of those people that now are in heaven had. We don't want a government here that is just like the governments we have fought overseas, tyrannical and not respecting of freedom. We want governments that respect freedom, that do things the right way.
Real quick, what do you think the timeline is on this? I mean, we have the announcement. What are the next steps?
Senator Paul's
Where does it
case?
go? And if it's going to the Supreme Court, what are we looking at?
It'll probably be assigned to a federal district court judge in Washington, D.C. this afternoon or tomorrow morning. The government will answer. There'll be oral argument. I would expect a decision by September. I would expect this will be on the Supreme Court's docket about a year to a year and a half from now. But ultimately, it will get there because so many judges are starting to weigh in that the whole legal community and judicial world will beg for one firm and consistent answer.
It'll be fascinating. Judge,
Yes.
great to have you on set.
Pleasure,
as always. Thank you.
Thank you.
He was the mayor of New Orleans when its people drowned. Now Ray Nagin is a convicted felon and a confirmed crook. This news broke in the last 30 minutes from the news deck. We're still waiting for Mayor Nagin to leave the court, and we'll see if he speaks. Meantime, the mayor who failed his city during its darkest hours could be going away for a very long time. He is the first mayor of New Orleans convicted of corruption in the city's nearly 300-year history. Convicted a short time ago of essentially selling his office and profiting personally as companies scrambled to clean up after Hurricane Katrina, he took the gold. He lined his pockets as neighborhoods in his city sat in ruins, as the very people who put him in office and entrusted him mourned the nearly 2,000 people who died. A short time ago, the jury found Mayor Nagin guilty of taking bribes, guilty of money laundering, guilty of wire fraud, and guilty of lying on his taxes. Nagin raked in things like cash, luxury trips for his family to Hawaii and Jamaica, free cell phone service for his family, and high-priced granite slabs for a company that he owns. In exchange, the then mayor handed out millions upon millions of dollars in New Orleans city contracts. All told, it could add up to many years in prison. Right now, he's on house arrest until sentencing day, which we believe will happen sometime in the spring, though a date hasn't yet been set. Let's bring in our chief judicial analyst, Judge Andrew Napolitano. Mayor Nagin had all the evidence stacked up against him. He chose not to take a plea deal that would have put him in jail for 5 years, and now he gets this.
Well, now he gets this. Guilty, as you said, on 20 of 21 charges, and guilty in the face of having spent 2 days on the stand under oath and denied the charges. So the jury is telling us that they believe that he lied to them. And I can tell you from having been there, nothing will set off a judge and a jury more than the conviction that the witness is lying to their faces.
All that New Orleans has been through.
New Orleans has been through a lot. New Orleans had a president who sent the buses after half of them were dead, a governor that was afraid of her own shadow, and a mayor was a crook at the height of the greatest crisis in the city of the history. Now, this is coming back to roost. The quantum of damages will be interesting here. How much human suffering there was, how much illicit wealth he accumulated, that's what the judge will look at when deciding how to sentence him. He's facing over 120 years. Probably will get something around 20, but he could get something anywhere in that range between 20 and 120. It's almost inconceivable that he would get less than 20.
And the reason for that, there are numerous reasons. One, he was in a position of public trust, obviously.
Yes.
That jumps the points up. What we don't know is whether they'll consider the hundreds of thousands of dollars that he is now convicted of taking, or the tens of millions of dollars in contracts on the people of the city.
The other thing that the court will take into account was, does this guy need to go to jail? Does he admit he did anything wrong? Now, you have him denying it emphatically under oath. So by refusing to acknowledge that what he did was wrong, he doesn't deny that he committed these acts. He claims the acts were lawful. By persisting in that view, if he does, that'll raise the bar for the number of years that he goes to jail.
One thing that we learned during this trial is the corruption, the bribes, the stealing, the cheating and the lying began before Katrina hit in 2005, continued during the cleanup of Katrina, and continued during the rebuilding of Katrina, and there's no telling what it cost the city of New Orleans. It all happened as he refused to answer reporters' questions. I only had one. I chased him for years, and he would not answer it. Mr. Nagin, why didn't you send the buses? Why didn't you?
Yeah.
He never had to answer it.
He doesn't have an answer for that, nor can he answer why the cleanup took so long and cost so much, because the costs were padded. to compensate the builders for the bribes they paid him.
Absolutely inconceivable. He is a convicted felon, the former mayor of New Orleans.
Count on nothing less than 20 years in a federal institution, starting soon.
And it won't be a Fed pad either.
No, it won't.
Judge, thank you.
You're welcome.
Well, choosing life is no longer an option in North Carolina. A federal court of appeals struck down the state's anti-abortion license plate, calling it unconstitutional because the state doesn't provide plates for pro-choice motorists. So should the government allow drivers to speak their minds, or is their message really against the law? Joining us now is Fox News senior judicial analyst, Judge Andrew Napolitano. Good morning.
Elizabeth, good morning.
So how do you feel about this ruling?
Well, I would describe myself as fiercely pro-life, and obviously am in favor of virtually anything that prevents abortions. But this is an interesting example of the state providing a platform, because the state owns the license plate, you don't, and limiting what you can say on the state's platform. So, for example, you put a bumper sticker on the bumper of your car, you put anything you want there. Sure. Choose choice, choose life.
Something that you buy, not from
Correct.
the state
But
of
if you're going to use something that the state is going to give you that you are required to put on your plate, then the state has to enable you to put a contrary view on it as well. So the state, if it wants you to be able to choose these choose life license plates, would have to give those who prefer not to choose life and not to announce that message the right to put what they want on their license plate.
And had North Carolina, had they denied the other side the chance?
Yeah, inexplicably they did. Most of these, this is a great listing here of license plates. Most of the states that say choose life actually let you put something else on there, choose choice, or whatever the phrase is. Okay. North Carolina wouldn't, and that's what was the problem here, because the state has to be neutral with respect to freedom of speech. It can't pick one side and suppress the other. That's the whole purpose of the First Amendment.
Absolutely, whether you agree with it or not,
yes.
both sides should be represented
yes.
well.
It's difficult for me to say that I would have voted with the majority had I been in this appeals court, because I am so strongly against abortion. But these judges, like I, have taken an oath to uphold the Constitution, and the Constitution is pretty clear. The state cannot suppress speech, no matter how much it disagrees with it.
First Amendment protection there. Judge Napolitano, thank you so much for being with us.
Pleasure. Good to
always.
be with you.
All right. Meanwhile, not only is the White House picking and choosing what numbers it wants to report, it is also picking and choosing what parts of this health care law it wants to enforce. Reason why 74% of Americans say the president's constant end rounds around Congress are wrong. That's exactly what our judge is saying. Andrew Napolitano, Judge, no surprise there, right?
No surprise. But I'm very pleased that the American people have caught on to this, because the president is doing the opposite of what he was elected to do. He was elected faithfully. I put my hand up because that word faithfully is in his oath of office. Faithfully to enforce the laws. When he doesn't enforce them, or when he picks and chooses which ones to enforce, or which parts of certain laws to enforce, he's actually telling people how to avoid the law, so he's doing the opposite of what he's been engaged to do.
All right, so you can not only come out with too few numbers to indicate what's really going on here, as Kate was pointing out, but you could pick and choose what you want to promote here. And I'm wondering, and you're the constitutional expert here, I mean, at what point are you just revising the stipulations of a law and just completely changing it?
Well, at some point, he is totally frustrating what Congress has written. I'll give you an example. There are 11 million people in the United States of America who are capable of being deported to their native countries. He said, if you do A, B, C, D, and E, I won't deport you. Where did the A, B, C, D, and E come from? He made it up. So by telling them what they need to do in order to avoid the law that he's been hired to enforce, he has frustrated the law and is doing the opposite of enforcing it. Now, Rand Paul sued the president yesterday because of NSA spying. If Rand Paul were to sue him tomorrow to try and get a judge to force the president to enforce the law, the judge would say, you know what, Senator Paul, your remedy is impeachment. Now, I don't think the Congress and the public has the stomach for that. But really, Neil, what are we supposed to do when the president does the opposite of what he's been hired to do, and there's sort of a cult around him in the Democratic Party that he's our guy and he can do whatever he wants?
Well, I got you here real quick. What did you think of Varney folding and saying, you know, Boehner did a great thing.
I love Stuart Varney, and I love you, but under Varney's theory, what is the sense of being a Republican if once you get in there, you're going to vote like a Democrat?
Yeah, well, I tried to tell him that, but you know, the Brits. All right, Judge, thank you very much.
All the best.
A lot of you know, some people take this thing like really super seriously. Calm down. We like each other, all right?
Climate change can now be considered another weapon of mass destruction.
But the debate is settled. Climate change is a fact. The budget that I send to Congress next month will include $1 billion in new funding for new technologies to help communities prepare for a changing climate.
Really? So if the president doesn't get his way, it sounds like he's going to use executive agenda to pass his green agenda. Is that legal? A lot of Republicans say no. Joining us right now is Fox News senior judicial analyst, Judge Andrew Napolitano. Let's forget about politics. We know that the Republicans don't agree with how he's using executive fiat. Right. But is what he's doing legal?
Well, yes and no. Every president has a great deal of discretion with respect to the environment. Right. This is Congress's fault. Years ago, when they created the Environmental Protection Administration in the Nixon administration, Congress gave the president discretion. How many parts per billion is acceptable in the air? And presidents could raise those parts to make it easier and less expensive for industry or lower those numbers. This president is using that discretion as he sees fit. But here's the kicker. He's also using it in ways that the Congress has expressly rejected, which makes it questionable morally, but probably still legal. In other areas, like immigration, where he's actually changed the law, Obamacare, where 29 changes to the statute, there he's completely and totally frustrated Congress's will, and Congress's silence is shameful.
Well, and we just ran a little soundbite where he's talking about, well, I'm going to use this billion-dollar fund. Where's that coming from?
I don't know where the billion-dollar fund is going to come from.
Well, that's important.
He does not have a slush fund that large, of which I am aware.
Unless he's able to combine a bunch of stuff.
Yes, which he would also claim that he has the authority to do because Congress is unwilling to meet the goals of a clean environment.
And we're showing some video of him out in California last week talking about how the droughts out there are caused by global warming when, in fact, you know, they're out of water because a federal judge ordered them to drain some reservoirs because of the bait fish of all things.
I thought they were out of water because they were watering golf courses too much. Do you believe that he played on a golf course that was saturated with water while the surrounding area doesn't have enough water with which to take showers?
Yeah, it is. You don't hear about that in the mainstream media, do you?
No, you don't.
We asked at Fox News, you, the American public, whether or not you approve of what the president is doing, using executive orders to get around Congress. Only about a third approve, close to two-thirds disapprove. Also, another poll question, executive orders to bypass Congress. Is this how the government is supposed to work? About a quarter say yes, and three-quarters, Judge, say no.
Remember, some executive orders are good and actually tell the 3 million people in the executive branch how to do their job. But when he frustrates the Congress, he's violating his oath to uphold and to enforce the laws faithfully. That's unconstitutional.
And every time I hear White House spokespeople go, well, you know, you look at Congress, their poll numbers are in the toilet. The president's more popular than them, but you look at those polls and people don't like what he's doing.
People don't like what he's doing. People want the government to work the way it's supposed to work.
All right. That's the way an interview is supposed to work, just like that. We ask you questions, you answer them.
I know you had a rough week with your loss, but welcome back.
Thank you very much, Judge.
In the meantime, a new plan to create a national license plate database. It would allow immigration agents to snap a photo of a license plate and see if they get a hit. The proposal stirring privacy concerns, and our chief intelligence correspondent, Catherine Harris, is tracking that down today. Hello, Catherine.
Well, thank you, Bill, and good afternoon. This program first came to light after a notice was posted seeking a government contractor to build a license plate recognition database for Homeland Security and one of its divisions for border and immigration issues. The automated technology was developed to help identify and track stolen cars and vehicles associated with felony offenses. The cameras simply take a photo of the vehicle plate and turn that image into data that can be stored indefinitely, according to the ACLU, who says the Homeland Security program is being developed in secret.
The DHS program has been developed under the radar. We know, incidentally, through a purchasing request, that DHS is intending to use these devices, but the public doesn't have any information on, for example, what privacy protections are going to be put in place, what DHS agents are going to be able to access this.
Critics also say the camera systems, which are more widespread in Europe, London, England, is often described as one of the most photographed cities on the planet. You see it here, being used in smaller municipalities in the United States for two reasons. The technology is getting cheaper by the day, and the federal government is subsidizing this technology. In a statement from Immigration and Customs Enforcement, a division of Homeland Security, a spokeswoman said the department, quote, is exploring the ability to obtain access to a national license plate recognition database, allowing officers and agents to identify subjects of ongoing criminal investigations. The database could only be accessed in conjunction with ongoing criminal investigations. But critics of the license plate database say it could be used in conjunction with other databases like the controversial phone records program known as 215. And this really creates a very fulsome picture of you, your routine, and your circle of contacts, Bill.
Catherine, thank you. We'll watch it. Catherine Herridge on that out of Washington. Heather has more now.
Boy,
Heather.
Raising a lot of eyebrows indeed. Well, for more on this, let's bring in Judge Andrew Napolitano, Fox News' senior judicial analyst. Judge, this is a done deal?
Apparently this is a done deal. And do you remember the great debate on the floor of the House of Representatives and the floor of the Senate over this? If you don't remember it, don't feel bad.
Because it didn't happen.
Correct.
Yeah. So how did this get in there?
This is another example of presidential overreaching, Heather. The same president who directed the NSA to engage in all spying all the time has now directed the Department of Homeland Security to take pictures of every license plate in the United States of America in certain select cities. They don't have the technology to put it everywhere yet. No matter who you are and no matter how innocent your driving may be.
Yeah, you're not the only one who's concerned about this. The ACLU is objecting to it, and they say, I want to put this up on the screen, the knowledge that one is subject to constant monitoring can chill the exercise of our cherished rights to free speech and association. They went on to say, if not properly secured, license plate reader databases open the door to abusive tracking and so on and so on.
Well, I fully agree with them. There's a couple of arguments here.
Yeah.
One is a watched society, a listened to society, a monitored society is afraid to be itself. And a generation of young people will come up, your children, never knowing what privacy is. The constitutional argument is a little bit more subtle. The Constitution imposes on law enforcement a bar they have to jump over before they can start investigating anybody for anything. That bar is called articulable suspicion. What is that person doing wrong? If the answer is nothing, then you can't start investigating them. You can't take a picture of them, you can't monitor them, and you can't track their movements. This procedure, never authorized by the Congress, imposed by the dictatorial instincts of the president himself, will monitor every move we make.
What kind of protections could be put in place now that this thing's a done deal?
None.
None?
None, because governmental power expands by nature. You put this information in the hands of Homeland Security, they'll combine it with what the NSA knows, and they'll know everything they need to know about us.
Now, Homeland Security says that it won't hold on to the information, that it'll actually be held on and stored by a private company. Do you feel better or worse given that answer?
I don't know what the standards would be for Homeland Security to get it from the private company. If the standards are a probable cause of crime, it'd be very difficult for them to get it. But the private company and Homeland Security shouldn't be photographing us in the first place. We should not be wondering and worrying when we're in the streets who's got the federal camera that's taking pictures of us.
But, Judge, we got to go on this. But on the other hand, we're on camera everywhere. The gas station, the grocery store, you name it, on the street. So
we can avoid the gas station and we can avoid the grocery store. We can't avoid the government.
Not the highways. Good point. Judge Andrew Napolitano, always great to talk with you.
Thank you, Judge.
Some new concerns now about your privacy after a new report that the government wants to create a national license plate tracking system. The Washington Post reports the database would be used to catch fugitives, specifically illegal immigrants. That's the plan. But it's already raising some questions over whether the database will track ordinary citizens with no criminal background. Surely Judge Andrew Napolitano has an opinion on this, Fox News senior judicial analyst. So great plan, Judge. Everyone's license plates gets photographed and collected.
Jenna, I feel like I'm shoveling against the tide. These things just keep coming down every day. I mean, this is a proposal not enacted by the Congress, not voted on by any of the people's representatives, but snuck into a budget by some bureaucrats who decide to go out and spend this money to hire this company to take pictures of every license plate in select major cities in the United States.
And let's be clear about what it does. Basically, law enforcement would be on the side of the road. In part, it would not only be law enforcement, but also these private companies that they're using, and they would scan our license plate. And this license plate scans go into a national database.
Correct. And the law enforcement that would be doing this is the new federal police department in the Department of Homeland Security. These are not local cops. These are federal cops taking pictures of people as they drive their cars on highways. This has never been done before. The FBI doesn't do this. You would think after the scandal with everything Edward Snowden revealed, which was never voted upon by the Congress, this would not happen. This will enable the government to know exactly where everybody has gone by these continued and repeated photographs of where their license plates are.
So there are those in favor of this, including the private companies that would help the government
sure, the private companies will make a lot of money off it.
But this is an interesting point. Obviously, you cannot cover your license plate when you're driving on the road. That's illegal to do. And this is one of the things that one of the companies talks to. The technology in use today basically replaces an old analog function, your eyeballs, they say. It's the same thing as a guy holding his head out the window, looking down the block and writing license plate numbers down and comparing them against a list.
You know
the
what?
technology just makes things better, Judge. That's what they say.
The Constitution establishes a bar over which the government must go before it can commence any investigation about anybody. And that bar is, I'll use the technical phrase, articulable suspicion. Stated differently, what did this guy do wrong?
So
Why are you investigating him? You can't just investigate anybody you want.
You're saying this comparison is wrong because if law enforcement was just driving around taking down people's license plates for no reason, they're not allowed to do that.
Law enforcement is not allowed to use its powers for no reason or on a hunch or a whim. It has to have a reason that they can articulate as to who did what wrong before they can start investigating.
Interesting part of the story is the public-private partnership, and that's one of the things that the Department of Homeland Security is talking about, saying that this would be run by a commercial enterprise. The data would be collected and stored by commercial enterprises, not the government. What difference does that make?
It doesn't make any difference at all. That's just a selling technique. The government would have complete electronic access to all the information in the servers of the private company.
Without a warrant.
Correct. Correct. Look, if this were done with a warrant, all the objections go away. But the government has this problem. It's called the Fourth Amendment. They keep cutting holes in their copy of it.
We were just talking a little bit about the Fourth Amendment last week. I just have to ask you this question, though. You're walking around the streets of New York. There's cameras all over the place in intersections and the like.
Yes.
You get the feeling that you are being photographed quite often.
Yes.
Is that any different than this?
No, it's equally as unconstitutional. But we've come to accept it. We've come to accept it because people somehow have accepted the view that all these cameras watching us keep us safe. They don't keep us safe. They just destroy our freedom. Well, and they will bring your children into a world where they will never know what privacy was.
I only have a quick minute here. But we went over this big debate in Arizona, right, over the illegal immigration and wondering if you could ask somebody their citizenship status if you pulled them over and you were law enforcement.
Right.
Interesting debate. The federal government did not like this.
Right.
Why would this be allowed to target illegal immigrants specifically?
It's insane that in this environment the government would want to target illegal immigrants. Guess what? They can't, because when they take the picture of the license plate, before they run it through their computer, they don't know to whom it's registered. So they're basically looking for a needle in a haystack. They're going to photograph every license plate in the city of Chicago to find a couple of hundred who are illegally present. That's not efficient. It's not constitutional.
Judge, thank you.
You're welcome.
But a free press is also essential for our democracy. Our freedom as a nation rests on our freedom of the press. We also live in a democracy where a free press, free expression, and the open flow of information helps hold me accountable.
President Obama said he's all about freedom of the press, so why is the administration rolling out a controversial new program to probe media outlets and grill them on how they report the news?
Joining us right now is a man that's head's exploding because of this.
Yes.
Fox News senior judicial analyst Judge Andrew Napolitano.
What will they think of next?
I mean, is this unbelievable?
It is unbelievable.
Well, first let's explain where it came from. This came from the White House.
This actually came from the White House, an instruction to the Federal Communications Commission, which does regulate Fox. It doesn't regulate Fox News Channel or Fox Business Network, but it regulates many entities owned by our parent corporation that also owns us because of the licenses we need from the FCC in order to transmit our programming. And so the FCC has said, we're thinking of sending agents into newsrooms to see how you determine what news stories to carry. Now, if that doesn't chill the freedom of the press, if that doesn't make you wonder and worry, my God, are the feds going to approve this decision that I'm making? Then that is a direct violation of the First Amendment.
Clearly, and then you look at what has happened, what was revealed in the last year, where the Department of Justice targeted the Associated Press, targeted our own James Rosen, because they were involved in somebody who was leaking information to them. Next thing you know, you put those two things together, it's chilling.
It's absolutely chilling. Chilling is a term of art to people that study the Constitution, and it basically means you are afraid to express yourself fully because the federal agents are looking over your shoulder.
Absolutely.
And guess what?
They're listening in on your phone calls.
Correct. Well, we already know they're listening in on our phone calls. They just beeped me because they're listening to exactly what I'm saying here without even watching us on television.
They're looking at, they're paging you?
Just about. They are reading our emails. They're reading our texts. They're looking at our bank statements. They're reading our utility bills. They know everything about us.
They put out my garbage last night.
Well, that would be nice if they did that. Now they want to know ahead of time what news we're going to cover. Those pieces you just ran of the president praising the First Amendment were accurate and true. What he forgot to say, however, is that this freedom is not just necessary and vital. It's absolutely guaranteed in the First Amendment, beyond dispute. There is no case that stands for the contrary of that proposition.
Can this survive based on the pressure that it's going to receive?
I don't think so. It's a great question. This is a radical new era of tyranny for the White House. I can't imagine it getting to first base.
Right, now, what do you recommend Roger Ailes do?
If the FCC shows up here, Mr. Ailes, throw them out, unless they have a search warrant from a judge, which they'll never get.
Well, I can't imagine any editor or any boss at any news outlet allowing them in, because right now it is voluntary, isn't it?
Well, all these things
are always voluntary.
This is like Joe Biden putting his arm on the shoulder of the president of BP saying, we need $20 billion bucks. You'll volunteer that, won't you? While the arm is still there. Nothing's voluntary with the government.
It's scary. All right.
Scary.
Judge Napolitano,
pleasure,
thank you very much.
Brian, you got me up early on this one.
Oh, you were flying in the hallway.
This is when it doesn't woken you right out of bed. It's so startling. Thank you, Judge.
Well, in the meantime, back here at home, brand new fallout now, a day after Homeland Security warns airlines to be on the lookout again for shoe bombers. Despite all of us having our shoes examined even more and more by the TSA, will the new crackdown actually make us safer? Judge Andrew Napolitano, Fox News senior judicial analyst, is here with his thoughts and a little bit of a chuckle because you know I love the laugh, but the bottom line is there's no way in HELL hockey sticks that you believe this is going to make us safer, right?
No, I think the TSA is basically an illusion designed to give us the appearance of safety. Look, the same mentality that runs the TSA runs the rest of the government. They can't deliver the mail, they can't collect taxes, they can't tell the truth. They don't keep us safe. They haven't stopped a single terrorist from boarding a single plane in the United States of America that we know about. And you know, if they had, they'd be boasting about it. The TSA, let on board the underwear bomber and the shoe bomber.
Well, so here's the thing. We would now assume, as it was just starting to maybe dwindle, that they were looking at our shoes more and more. Now they're going to ramp it back up, right?
I'll give them the benefit of the doubt. They have received from intelligence communities credible information that somebody out there with the present apparent ability to do so has threatened to put some nut on a plane ready to explode his shoes and kill everybody. Here's the problem with the TSA. When they fail, they get richer. When they fail, they get more TSA agents and more budget money.
Well, you say that the TSA has doubled in size and budget since George W. Bush, but here's the other really interesting thing that you're proposing. And it has to do with taking the power away from the TSA and giving it back to the airlines for so-called private security measures. How would that work?
Well, it would be a lot more efficient, it would be a lot more user-friendly, and you could choose the level of security that you want. Right now, if the TSA fails, they get more money from the federal government. If the people who have the most to lose
The owners of the airplanes fail. Their loss is catastrophic in terms of the lawsuits, in terms of the loss of business, in terms of the destruction of their investments. Think about it. The government intervenes with a private business at its most critical relationship to its customers when they're boarding the planes of the owners of the business.
Well, so how would that work then? Let's say United Airlines, American Airlines, JetBlue.
The first good thing is that there'd be no civil liberties issues, because the Fourth Amendment only regulates the government. It doesn't regulate United Airlines and Delta. So United and Delta would say, here's the strict line. We're gonna search you for everything, and you'll be on the safest plane. Here's a line that's not so strict. Here's a line that's pre-screened. Freedom of choice. You choose the line that you want. You choose the plane that you want.
Chances of that happening?
None. Government will never give up the power. I hope they're listening to us now.
Well, it's a fascinating idea, and of course, you're smart enough to bring it to us.
Oh, you're very kind.
Judge, great to see you.
Good to be with you.